Can you say friends, talking, nerdy? Close enough.
If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Welcome to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim the Nerd, and seated next to me we have a properly sugared up Professor Aubrey.
Boing.
Yes, and this week we wanted to talk about the passing of a pop culture icon. Val Kilmer. The word has recently come out as we record this that he has passed away. So what we wanted to do here is kind of talk a little bit about his career. Not our normal 5 choices list, because we found out in doing the research that we did for this episode that we don't necessarily have 5 choices we want to put together. But his work...
Based mostly on that we haven't seen things that he was in.
Exactly, but with the things that we have seen and with the impact that he had on culture, pop culture in the late 80s and early 90s, I mean, he was one of those figures, those enigmatic Hollywood figures that you would be annoyed to be around in real life, but are still fascinating because of the artistry of what they can do.
Yeah, I wanted to hang out with Val Kilmer. I mean, he rose to prominence in the time I was in high school. I'm sure you remember when you were in high school, you were very tuned in to what was happening in the movie TV scene.
Me? No. No, not at all.
But even I was at that time, keeping track of who was in movies, and that's who does that, or the tweens and the teens tell us all what the cool things are.
Yeah, and
so he was cool.
Exactly, and kind of piggybacking off of that, I can dive into a movie remembrance here because I can thank Val Kilmer for giving me my interest in The Doors.
Really?
Yeah, he, if you are not aware, and our friends at home, Val Kilmer was the star of the Oliver Stone movie, The Doors. That was the first album I ever purchased on cassette.
Ah.
And one hell of a great purchase. It's essentially a greatest hits album. So if you're a fan of The Doors, you probably already have that, but it has a couple of additional tracks too. Believe it or not, most people aren't necessarily aware that after Jim Morrison died, the band continued on for a couple of albums. They did have they did put to music some written poetry that Jim Morrison had recorded, and they also released a couple of live albums as well. But great tracks throughout, and his portrayal of Morrison was iconic in a lot of ways. Now, this movie also kind of made me realize, especially, with the hindsight of time now, the importance of not necessarily believing the story that you see in a biopic. What do I mean by that? And Oliver Stone is notorious for this because he's done a lot of biopics over the years, and there are a lot of people that come out and say, well, that didn't happen and that didn't happen. When you have a movie like that, it is a movie. They're there to tell a story. Even though that story may be about a true person, there are plenty of incidents in plenty of movies throughout the years to where things had to change because it looks better in Hollywood a different way. Mm-hmm. And I think The Doors, hindsight being 2020, just kind of showcased a side of Jim Morrison that was a part of him, but not completely him, if that makes sense.
I think it's hard for biopics to be able to capture the three-dimensional person. And of course, you don't want to... Biopics are sort of designed to honor someone's legacy rather than be completely honest about everything that they were. It's like the difference between telling the truth and being candid or being transparent. Do you know what I mean?
Explain.
If I tell the truth, you ask me questions, I will never lie to you. But I may not tell you important things that you ought to know.
You will answer the direct question that I ask you and not fill it in with more information than is needed based on the question I ask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they're doing the same thing in the biopic where everything they're saying is true, but there was a lot more to it.
And I get that, and ideally, I think the idea of any biopic really is that the filmmaker is so inspired by the life of this person that they want to tell the world about them, right? And the idea is that you're going to get people that will watch a movie like The Doors and be like, I want to know more about this guy, and start reading some books or listening to his music and go from there. I think the thing to be careful of again is treating the biopic as if it is a piece of documented history. It's not. It's a fictionalized story. It has to be. In order to make a motion picture that you watch on a screen, it's different than a book. It's different than a documentary in some ways, but you get my point.
Yeah.
But overall, I would say, even though I went through all of that talking about how I felt that the film did kind of portray Jim Morrison as kind of one way, like his performance, Val's performance as Jim Morrison was uncanny. I mean, I think it was Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player for The Doors, who talked about hearing a tape that Val Kilmer put together of him singing songs of The Doors, and he thought it was Jim Morrison actually singing.
Wow.
I would put it up there probably with one of Oliver Stone's best, not his absolute best, but it's an important work of his. And
sure.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on The Doors?
I loved that movie. It is what introduced me to The Doors and made me really a big fan of The Doors, although I had known about them before the movie. Val Kilmer did an amazing job portraying Jim Morrison. And Meg Ryan was his girlfriend.
One of his girlfriends.
One of his girlfriends. His most serious girlfriend, perhaps.
Yeah. I guess they lived. There's a song on the soundtrack called Love Street that he wrote about her. She lives on Love Street, and it's based on an actual place in Laurel Canyon. Like they have now, they have like one of those historical markers. Like this is Love Street that Jim Morrison wrote about. Even though in the '60s they were looking to arrest the guy for anything they could.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the ones that has definitely become more acceptable as time has gone on.
Yeah. No, interesting factoid. I think I believe I've brought this up on the show before, but with the amount of factoids that I throw your way, if you've forgotten this factoid, you're fine. Did you know that Jim Morrison's father was in the military and involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident in Vietnam?
No.
Yes. The Gulf of Tonkin incident is the incident that was the basis for the United States military escalating their presence in Vietnam, and history has shown, with hindsight being 2020, that whole incident was faked. Best case scenario, it was people looking for a justification and then finding out later that it didn't happen. But there's also plenty of evidence to show that, certain people in the Johnson administration wanted that increase. Mm-hmm. And so they found it. And Jim Morrison's dad was involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Pretty wild. Speaking of wild, you have a choice for a film of Val Kilmer's you wanted to talk about?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to talk about Real Genius. This was one of his breakout roles. It's from 1985. And really hilarious comedy about really smart kids who go to a really smart school, and lots of wacky things happen, and Val Kilmer's in the middle of all of the action, and he's the attractive figure in the movie and the main protagonist, and it's a really great funny movie. Have you ever seen it?
I've never seen it. before we recorded, and while you were out, I did watch a couple of YouTube videos about 10 things you didn't know about Real Genius, and found out that the initial screenwriters for that movie were the minds behind Police Academy.
Oh, wow.
So there was that, but this was actually directed by a woman. Off the top of my head, I don't know her name, but if you do an IMDb search on this movie, you'll find out her name. But when she came on board, one thing that she did not like was in the original script, it was a lot more raunchier, because I believe the folks behind Police Academy were also the creative team behind Revenge of the Nerds.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was very
bad,
yeah.
By today's standards. In the 80s, it was cool for sexual assault to happen, I guess. But anyway, the woman in question said that if she were to come on board, she didn't want the raunchiness. She wanted a comedy still, but she wanted a comedy. She felt like there was real comedy in presenting it in as realistic a way as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And this came out in the same year as Weird Science. Weird Science ended up making a little bit more money at the box office, but that does not make it a quality movie or anything like that. So, also John Cusack was up for the Val Kilmer role at one point, but turned it down for Better Off Dead.
Well, that was a mistake. Don't you think?
I've never seen that one myself. There are a lot of those mid to early 80s comedies that I've not watched, like Tootsie. I've never seen Tootsie, even though I remember Tootsie. I saw a poster of Tootsie when I saw my first film in theaters, E.T., in 1982. And just thinking, why is that man in a dress?
Yeah, I definitely saw Tootsie when it came out.
Yeah. But that's what I learned about that movie. I mean, it's one of those deals that if it were to ever come on, it from the sounds of it, it does not seem like the type of movie I would necessarily be repelled by, but it's not something that I have a passion to see at some point.
Sure. I get that. I think that's where that movie fits in your realm.
Yeah. I did also find out, too, that the popcorn incident at the end of the movie, the Mythbusters people tried to see if that could actually happen, and they determined that even though it could not happen as it was depicted in the movie, it is possible for a laser to cook a piece of popcorn.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, so just for the folks at home, the big gag at the end, or the big culmination of everything that's happened in the movie, is they use a laser beam to pop a giant Jiffy Pop container of popcorn that then floods the entire house and starts coming out the windows and doors. And
apparently the popcorn had to be covered in fire retardant stuff, because in real life, there would have been a chance that the popcorn could have gone up in flames. But that also created another problem too, because they're filming during the summer in California with birds around.
Yeah.
And they had to keep the birds away from the popcorn. And thankfully they did that, I guess. But, there you go. The more you know.
The more you know.
So I did some research.
Yeah.
When I was watching a video.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, how about I talk about another movie of his that was really cool to watch back in the day?
Okay, yeah. Let's hear it.
Tombstone.
Good one.
Yes. So you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Kurt Russell classic, where Val Kilmer plays Doc Holliday. And one of my absolute favorite scenes in that movie is where the Michael Biehn character, part of I forgot the group's name. The bad guys called themselves the Outlaws or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Michael Biehn is doing the fancy, tricks with the gun on your finger, like twirling it and all that stuff. And, it's kind of like kind of like that South Park episode where the kids from a different neighborhood show up and challenge the others to dance.
Oh,
It was kind of like that. It's like, ooh, everybody in this room was like, ooh. And then Val Kilmer just sits there. And then, like, his character, Doc Holliday, was dealing with tuberculosis, and I guess he had a special drink that he used that I'm sure got him quite drunk as well.
Uh-huh.
But it was a little tin cup, and he started doing the same trick with the gun that Michael Biehn did with the gun with the cup. And then everybody just started laughing, and it kind of diffused the situation, too. But what I love about this movie is the fact that Westerns in the 90s, when they actually did make them, were being presented more as cinema. What do I mean? Dances with Wolves. Great movie. Unforgiven from Clint Eastwood. Great movie, but it was cinema. It was meant to be a serious affair, whereas Tombstone was, in a lot of ways, harkening back to stuff like The Lone Ranger, like, you know, your Wyatt Earp TV shows or something like that, a straight-up action movie that did have a lot of correct historical information about Wyatt Earp as well.
It did.
It did. Again, going back to what I said about the Doors, it's not a perfect thing. There are definitely liberties that they did take with the story, but up to that time, it was one of the most honest depictions of Wyatt Earp, because, funny enough, Wyatt Earp was alive in the early half of the 20th century. And he was actually involved behind the scenes in Hollywood for like Westerns and stuff. And him and his wife, who in the movie was portrayed by Dana Delaney, kept a tight lid on his real story. You know? So I thought it was one heck of a great film, the type of Western you really don't see anymore. And do I think there's a chance we could see a movie like that again? Never say never, but I just don't think Westerns are ever going to be at the point to where there's going to be any sort of a mass, you know, acceptance of, you know, them in a movie theater again.
Well, I think if it's something like The World, what's that TV show? Westworld. That's kind of like a Western. It has lots of Western elements, but it's not really a Western.
And you could argue stuff like, you know, Robert Rodriguez with his El Mariachi trilogy, like Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, are kind of following the old Western rules, you know, of it was Westerns that came up with the old formula of the good guy can keep on shooting until the story determines that he needs to be out of bullets. So it's not, if anything, I guess, yeah, like I should think of it like MTV in a sense, you know, it had its purpose, but now the consumption of music videos has evolved into a much different thing. We don't need MTV anymore, just like we don't need an actual, you know, people riding horses type of Western anymore. You can take those same rules and put them in something else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of like a sort of like the hero's journey, a different version of that.
Well, speaking of that, I think that is a perfect segue into a choice of yours that you wanted to talk about.
Yes. The next one I want to talk about is Willow. Are you familiar with Willow?
Definitely familiar. I've never watched it. Don't have any real plans to, but I know it's based off a story by George Lucas and directed by Ron Howard.
Yep.
Val Kilmer stars in it, and
Warwick Davis,
yes. Yeah, I do have 6 degrees of separation from Warwick Davis.
Oh, really?
Yes, I went to a college back in Grand Rapids with a guy by the name of Paige Kennedy, who later went on to star in the direct-to-DVD sequel Leprechaun: Back to the Hood.
Oh.
With Warwick Davis. So.
Nice. Yeah, the whole leprechaun thing.
Yeah, I'm the leprechaun.
I think that, you know, Warwick Davis, I would imagine, is quite proud of his work on Willow, and maybe not so much his later works in Leprechaun.
Yeah, I'm sure he liked the Patriots.
I'm sure I was going to say he's laughing all the way to the bank, so.
Yeah, like, I mean, at the end of the day, acting's a job.
Yes. Pretty fun job, apparently. People like to do it.
Yep. But Willow.
So Willow is the story of Elora Danan, a human baby, or not a humanoid baby, that is magical, who needs to be protected and transported to where she needs to be so that the right thing can happen in the universe, right? And so it's a story of a journey.
A hero's journey?
A hero's journey. that Willow Offgood, who's Warwick Davis plays, goes along, meets a thief who's being punished by hanging in a cage at a crossroads, no access to food or water, so gonna die there in the crossroads, and basically convinces Willow Offgood to let him out and let him join the party. And so he joins the merry band of Willow Offgood and the little baby, and they make it to where they're supposed to be, and it's all triumphant. He turns out to be a good guy.
Ah, the rogue with a heart of gold.
Yes.
I wonder where George Lucas got that idea.
Right. It wasn't a popular character in another one of his properties, right?
Yeah. If I remember correctly, the movie did not necessarily do well at the box office, but that was also in a day, thanks to home media, to where more people ended up catching it later, and its status today is definitely considered a classic of the fantasy genre. I know that there was a Disney Plus sequel TV show.
Really?
That they had out. I don't know if it's currently on the service. I think it was on at one point and then they took it off, which caused a bit of a controversy. But the character definitely lives on. And being that it's fantasy, the chances of me seeing it are pretty slim. Not impossible, but pretty slim.
Yeah, I loved it. I liked very many fantasy things. It's just making me think of that story of when Tom Hanks played a centaur or something like that. And Liv Tyler maybe was a goddess of some sort. And then there was a demon played by Tim Curry. Do you remember this at all? Legend,
but that was not Tom Hanks. That was Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, that's what I meant. Tom Cruise.
I had the Tom right.
I was just thinking very, very...
And it wasn't Liv Tyler. Like, Liv Tyler was a child.
Who was it?
I think Jennifer Connelly, maybe?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might have been her.
It wasn't Jennifer Aniston.
No. But she was in the first Leprechaun.
Was she?
Yeah. That was before Friends. That's my 6 degrees of separation from Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
So it's a great movie and everybody should see it. I think you should at least see it for its contributions to pop culture, but I know that you don't like to watch movies for that reason.
Yeah, and formally into George Lucas's pocketbook, but now it's the Disney Corporation, but maybe someday, who knows? But I say all that about fantasy, and then my next choice was the first time I saw Batman on a big screen. Batman Forever with Val Kilmer as Batman. That was the one where you had Jim Carrey as the Riddler. You had Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. And the love interest in the movie, Dr. Chase Meridian, was played by one Nicole Kidman. This is the movie that had a pretty unique soundtrack. It was really a soundtrack that felt like some movie executive pulled some songs out of a hat and put it all together, because you had songs from like the Smashing Pumpkins. You had a U2 song that was actually pretty good called Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me. And then you had Kiss Like a Rose from Seal. That came from Batman Forever. But Batman Forever was Joel Schumacher's first Batman movie and the start of the 90s camp era of Batman. And there are a lot of critics of that era. And I'm not exactly the biggest fan of those movies in the world. I think... I can see what Schumacher was going for. I just wish he picked actors that knew how to perform comedy. Because not every actor can be funny.
No.
And if you're telling a campy story, you need an Adam West type in there. And Val Kilmer was just playing it like any other role. Now, that is a critique, but I being that it was the first Batman movie that I saw in theaters, it will always have a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
And Batman, you go to see a Batman movie, because you want to see Batman beat up the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even in the Christopher Nolan serious takes, you know, I mean, that is the beauty of the character, the fact that you can have a more serious take on that particular story, a take that could be considered, you know, realistic somewhat. You know, you're not going to have like a, you know, a Clayface type of character in that type of story. This is one that I think had a lot of potential. It's like the Joel Schumacher films, like on paper, seem awesome, but the execution is always lacking. You know, he did like Flatliners, The Incredible Shrinking Woman with Lily Tomlin. You know, the Batman and Robin, of course, the sequel to Batman Forever, which introduced the bat nipples. And me describing that, you know, what kind of mammary glands does Bruce Wayne have? No.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you think of Batman now, do you sort of subconsciously always see Batman as Val Kilmer?
No, even though Val Kilmer was the first Batman I saw in theaters, my Batman was Michael Keaton.
Okay.
He'll always be Michael Keaton. But I'm, you know, also someone that grew up like, you know, a fan of the Bond universe. It's okay to say that, you know, one actor, if you have a slew of actors playing a character, it's okay to say, you know, hey, I prefer this actor over the others, but that's not knocking the others at all. Because, like, on paper, I think, you know, like, George Clooney on paper should have done a great Bruce Wayne, a great Batman, but his movie tanked.
Yeah, his movie was really bad.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's just weird. Like, Joel Schumacher had the weirdest career. Unfortunately, I believe he's passed away and everything. But yeah, my thoughts on Batman Forever. Did you see it either in theaters or on DVD or VHS?
I don't think so. I think of like superhero movies a similar way that you do fantasy movies. Just that I will watch them.
Unlike you.
Unlike you refuse to watch them, but I will watch movies that I don't think I'm going to like just to see if I'm going to like them.
Yeah. Like, and also too, like, this came out, I believe, around like 95. So you were in your college experience. I was just about to go to college myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you were going a much more serious career path than me watching Batman.
That's right.
All right. You have another choice you wanted to talk about here?
Yeah, so my final choice is going to be Top Gun from 1986. I was 12 years old and in love with Val Kilmer. He was the bad boy. The bad boy of Top Gun. Very cute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have seen that movie. There are a lot of people that are involved in that movie whose careers I've absolutely loved, including Val Kilmer's. That movie just did not do it for me. I guess I've never been a Tom Cruise fan. I've just not. Like, I could tolerate him in Interview with the Vampire. I thought he did really good in that movie. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just too biased based on his public persona and everything. But like, are you familiar with the movie American Psycho? It's not a movie I think you would have seen, but it was a Christian Bale movie from the early 2000s. It was a horror movie that was based off a book written by, I believe, a Portland resident, Bret Easton Ellis. Christian Bale said that he based his performance of the lead character in American Psycho on an interview he saw Tom Cruise do on the Letterman show. I guess Tom was looking at David Letterman with like a smile on his face, but his eyes were like vacant and soulless. I guess Christian Bale described it as. So there's that. You're familiar with one of the big songs from that movie, though, right? Berlin, Take My Breath Away?
Yeah, Take My Breath Away.
The woman who sang that actually auditioned for the role of Princess Leia in the original Star Wars movies.
Really?
Yeah, there is a documentary they put out called Empire of Dreams, to where they show some of the screen tests that some actors did for the Star Wars movies, and she was one of them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, is that something we could potentially see sometime?
The Empire of Dreams documentary?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's on both YouTube and Disney+.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So there is that. Also, when it comes to Top Gun, did you see the sequel?
The most recent, the 2022
Top Gun Maverick, yeah.
No, absolutely I did not.
Well, Val Kilmer did reprise his role from the original movie in that.
As Iceman?
Yeah, and in the sequel, by that time, he was already dealing with the throat cancer and could not speak. So the voice you hear in the film, I guess, is obviously via, AI or, computer learning.
Does he lip sync it?
I believe so, yeah.
I would love to check that out.
Yeah. I hope you enjoy it when you see it. Not a Tom Cruise fan. I don't like him. Like, he's made it's the Mission Impossible movies more than anything. Like, everybody's going to have weird beliefs, so it's not about the Scientology. It's the Mission Impossible movies. He just...
I don't mind them so much.
Yeah, they're just not Mission Impossible to me. Like, it's not Mission Impossible. He just took a big old dump on that franchise. And how can you say that, Tim, when he's made all kinds of money with it? Like, that doesn't mean he did it right. It
depends on what you feel is right.
Yeah. So I'll sit here in my obscurity while he's making billions of dollars with the latest Mission Impossible film. But
you're right.
But I am right. Yeah. That's right. But any other thoughts about Top Gun?
No.
No. All right. Well, how about I talk about the last film I wanted to bring up here today?
That'd be great.
All right. This is a mid-2000s independent production that he was in. This was kind of around the starting of the peak of the Red Box era in America. If our friends at home are not familiar with that, that was a company, I believe, originally started by McDonald's. That would just be like a DVD kiosk, that they would put up in like 7-Elevens or McDonald's or other places to where you can pop in $1 or $2 and get a movie, go home, and then bring it back. And, even though places like Blockbuster went out of business, I thought the kiosk was not a bad idea.
And they were around for much longer. Yeah,
much, much longer. So a lot of times producers would make, movies that would essentially be direct-to-Redbox movies, or movies that, in America may go to the Redbox, but in like Malaysia, for instance, could open up in a theater because if, this particular movie in question, which is either called the Steam Experiment or the Chaos Experiment, depending on where you saw it in the world, when you have a big name like Val Kilmer, you can go to Malaysia, a smaller country, and debut it in theaters and get, much more money that way than just by putting it on, DVD everywhere in the world. So the companies would, routinely, and they still do it, will hire big name actors for like 1 or 2 days worth of work. But, like this film had a $7 million budget. I'm sure a couple million of that was for the few days that Val Kilmer did the work on this particular film. And the film was actually filmed in Grand Rapids, Michigan, my hometown.
Really?
Yeah, which is why it caught my eye. The whole premise is that the Val Kilmer character goes to a local newspaper and says he has 6 people trapped in a sauna and that he is going to continually turn up the heat unless the government somewhere does something about global warming. Something that would never really happen in real life, but for the premise of a B genre movie like that, it's like in the right hands it could have been something. This was not something.
Well, it was something.
It was something, but
it was like a big pile of something.
That would be an insult to a big pile of something.
Oh, whoa.
It was just rather boring. It was like lots of talk. Like you could tell that it was just quickly filmed, but they did lots of talk with Kilmer and Armand Asante, and then later Eric Roberts, who takes, if we had enough money, we could hire him for a job, which is not knocking him. He gets to work, great. But they would take scenes to where the known actors would talk to each other and then cut to the unknown actors that are trapped in the sauna, because the guy who was worried about global warming, the Val Kilmer character, wanted to show that if everything heated up, everybody would get more violent. and, deaths galore. They do have women in the sauna that, of course, just obligatorily have to, take their boobs out because America, right?
Right.
But yeah, not it shows this movie, this was also around the era to where, like, word had come out about Val Kilmer being a little difficult to work with. Like, companies will deal with a lot from anybody in any type of industry out there if that person can continue to bring them lots and lots and lots of money. But Val Kilmer by that point was on the tail end of his of his mainstream career in terms of getting the big leading roles in big budget films. Hey, he was still working until, the very end. So it's not like he, became like a bagger at a grocery store in Duluth, Minnesota, but it showed that, his career was just in a different spot than it was in the 80s. But as I was doing the research for this episode, I went to IMDb and looked at the cast and crew list, and there was a name that was one of the executive producers of the movie that caught my eye. Stephen Bannon.
Whoa.
Steve Bannon. That Steve Bannon, the guy who helped get Trump elected twice, was an executive producer on The Chaos Experiment, which was released in 2008.
Wow.
And going through his IMDb credits, he was definitely involved in some political movies at this particular time. I know he was a friend with Andrew Breitbart, a vile person who I hope is getting defiled down in hell as we speak. 2008, this movie is filmed in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and filmed at the Amway Grand Plaza Hotel. It is not out of the realm of possibility that this could have been the instance where Steve Bannon met one Betsy DeVos. For people that don't know, the Amway Corporation was started by Dick DeVos and Richard Van Andel. And Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of Education in the first Trump term, and not Linda McMahon, who thinks AI is A1. Yeah, she ended up marrying into that family. So, like again, I don't know for certain, but based on the timeline, it would not be out of the realm of possibility. Now, this could also just be something else completely different, because there are times in movies to where people will get an executive producer credit, which gets them some money at the end, but that doesn't mean they had anything to do with the film.
Right.
So this could have been that as well. He could have just been somebody who put up capital and nothing more. But, considering everything we know now, it would not shock me to find out that this movie, this Val Kilmer movie filmed in Grand Rapids, Michigan, was where he was introduced to one Betsy DeVos.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, would I recommend watching it? No. I did rent it from a Redbox myself, and, it was $1. $1 I'll never get back, but it didn't bankrupt me.
Yeah.
So and towards the end of his career, he did have other stuff. Like, there's one I should see. It was written and directed, I believe, by Shane Black, and it was also the film that helped get Robert Downey Jr. back on the good graces of Hollywood, called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yeah.
I have heard good things about that, and that's one that I'm kind of surprised I have not seen yet, because Shane Black, for those who may not be aware, was the guy who wrote the original Lethal Weapon movies.
Okay.
So, you may not like Mel Gibson, but if you get the tone of, the script, from that movie in terms of the dialogue and all that stuff, you can kind of get the idea of what Kiss Kiss Bang Bang could be,
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, Val Kilmer had a long career full of ups and downs, but one thing as an artist that cannot be denied is that he will not be forgotten.
No, he was an excellent actor.
He definitely was. It would have been more awesome if he had some more bigger hits along the way, but again, he took some chances that I think others in his position might not have, like The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yes, which I noticed that we didn't talk about that one.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I didn't see that. The Island of Dr. Moreau is considered one of the worst movies ever made. And just, it co-starred Marlon Brando, and this is an era where Marlon Brando just did not give a fuck, but was also so highly lauded as an actor that people would just let him do whatever he wanted and would not stand up to him.
Mm-hmm.
So, bizarre movie. It's like the behind the scenes stories are more interesting than the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stars in that movie, David Thewlis, who went on to be in the Harry Potter movies, of course, but is now the Shame Wizard on Big Mouth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there is that, but Val Kilmer, we'll never forget.
No.
Yeah.
I'm glad we could do this little tribute.
Yes, I'm glad to. Yeah, like it's, you know, every actor that has worked for a long time like he did will put out stuff that people are going to like and dislike. You can be respectful while talking about stuff you did not necessarily find enjoyable yourself.
Absolutely, you can.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk about a couple of things here real quick. As we record this, we are about a week away from the WWE Hall of Fame induction ceremony for 2025, and I wanted to briefly go over the people who are going in this year.
Okay.
All right.
They've already announced who's going in.
Yes.
Okay.
One, Mr. Lex Luger. He was, you're like, who's that? I don't care.
I've heard that name. That's why I'm looking quizzical. Lex Luger. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he got his big time start working in Jim Crockett Promotions, which ended up becoming World Championship Wrestling. He did spend some time in the WWF in the early 90s, first as the narcissist Lex Luger, but then he became the All-American Lex Luger when he body slammed Yokozuna on Battleship on July 4th. They had this body slam competition to where they had athletes try to body slam Yokozuna and nobody could do it, but then Lex Luger arrives in a helicopter and, you know, he's able to do it. Now, Luger, at the tail end of his career, started making some bad choices. You know, his girlfriend at the time was Miss Elizabeth.
Really?
Yes, but sadly, Miss Elizabeth died because of access to drugs that she ended up getting thanks from Lex Luger.
Really? That's who sold her the drugs?
Well, he had them in his possession too. So, like, when the police came, you know, because he called 911 and all that stuff, and, you know, when the police came and saw all the drugs that were around, you know, he ended up getting some legal trouble because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Then a few years after that, he ended up injuring his back and ended up becoming paralyzed. Thankfully, he has changed his life around a lot and is currently going through rehab with Diamond Dallas Page, the guy who does the DDP yoga, was a former wrestler.
Right.
But trying to help him get the strength back to get up and walk. And I think what would be cool, what I think we're probably going to see is that he'll probably come on a stage in a wheelchair, but then stop and then get up and take a couple of steps to the stage, and everybody will clap and, you know, cry and all that stuff. So,
nice.
You know, he did a lot of shitty things, made a lot of bad mistakes, but I'm all for celebrating somebody that has gone through it and sought redemption and, you know, did their best to make amends for their mistakes and honest amends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think he's one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
The next people is a tag team called the Natural Disasters, but it's Earthquake and Typhoon.
Nice.
Earthquake, John Tenta should have been in on his own a long time ago. Was, you know, one of the first big giant heels that came just at the tail end of Andre the Giant's career. So he's like one of the big monsters that, you know, Hogan would end up defeating on numerous occasions. His tag team partner Typhoon was originally in the WWF as Tugboat, you know, because he's a wrestling tugboat. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a tugboat captain with a silly hat and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but his name is Fred Ottman. He is legitimately Cody Rhodes' uncle.
Oh, wow.
And he is also infamous for being the Shockmaster in WCW.
Wow.
That was a character that was debuted on a live Clash of the Champions on TBS. And what happened is they built this wall that he was going to burst through, and he had this stormtrooper mask from Star Wars that was covered in glitter. But what happened is like there was some miscommunication about how the wall was supposed to be built, and they put a little 2x4 at the bottom that he was not aware of was there. So he tripped, fell out of the wall, the helmet fell off, and he grabbed it real quick and put it back on. And you can hear Davy Boy Smith in the background go, "Oh, bloody hell."
Oh, bloody hell.
Yeah, so, he was known for that infamous moment in professional wrestling history, but two men that do deserve it. Speaking of deserving it, this one is kind of a controversial choice. Her name is Michelle McCool. She had an 11-year career in the WWE. I think she was one of the first group of women that were brought in to not just be there for their looks, but it was still at an era to where women were lucky to get, 5 minutes for a wrestling match in the ring. And, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, 5 minutes in a match, unless you're an already well-established character, is not enough time to get the audience invested.
Mm.
She had an 11-year career. Who am I, with as athletic as as I am, to knock somebody who had an 11-year career in the world of professional wrestling? It's just she didn't really have anything that stood out as, oh my God, she's one of the best. The reason why people are at least putting an asterisk next to this, her husband is the Undertaker.
Oh.
And people are thinking that, he put some word into higher up saying, can my wife get into the Hall of Fame too?
Mm.
Again, there are other people that have, like Drew Carey was in the WWE Hall of Fame for his one appearance on their show. So, who am I to knock her getting in? But, there are other women that are far more deserving that are not in yet.
Aren't they still working?
Some yes, some no.
Right.
So there is that. They're also, this year is the first time they're doing what they're calling a WWE Immortal event. Basically taking one match and taking the participants in the match and putting that into the Hall of Fame itself. And the one they're doing is the I Quit match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret the Hitman Hart at WrestleMania 13, which was one of the greatest matches I think I've ever seen. And it was interesting too because it was also one of the best examples of what they call a double switch. What is that? Bret Hart going into that match was considered a good guy by the audience. Steve Austin was considered a bad guy. By the end of that match, their roles reversed. And that is really hard to pull off, but they did it masterfully at this particular point. Like, this match was the beginning of Stone Cold Steve Austin becoming the legend that we know today. Mm-hmm. So if any match has to start things off, I'm glad it's this one. But last but not least, Paul Triple H Levesque is going into the WWE Hall of Fame. Yeah. I think, if I'm going to say this for the Michelle McCool entry, I think I have to say it here. There are some people that would put an asterisk next to his name because his wife is Stephanie McMahon. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, there have been plenty of instances of wrestling promoters throughout the years that have put family members, whether it be actual blood family or in-laws or something like that, into positions as champions just because they know they could trust them. Mm-hmm. And there are plenty of people who think Triple H falls under that category. I am not one of those. That doesn't mean that, every, creative output that they had for his character, I agree with 100%. By no means. If you have a long career, there's going to be plenty to critique. But, he's a student of the game, as they say, and very, very well deserving. And I think also too the past couple of years, thanks to him now being in control of WWE Creative, kind of shows just how good of a mind for professional wrestling that he has. So very much deserved. And I know a lot you may be familiar with some of those names. Not going to ask you to comment or anything like that, but that is this year's WWE Hall of Fame class.
Nice. I am familiar with some of those names, yes.
Yes.
And I could pick them out from a lineup. That's probably about it.
Some of them, yes. Yes, so definitely interesting information there. Also wanted to talk about the new season of Doctor Who. As we record this, it dropped yesterday on Disney Plus. The first episode. It's going to show up in America here on Saturdays for the next 8 weeks or so, and I watched it, and I don't know if I want to watch any further episodes.
Really?
I think the show, I can't say it's passed me on, because there have been times in the past during the original run to where I was into certain things, and then they would take a creative change, with like a new doctor or something like that, or new writers or something, and they would end up losing me, and they're losing me again. It's not that I dislike the character now or anything like that, but just like the flame that was there that I had for that character is just gone now. And that's okay. That's not the end of the world. It's like, but watching this, it was like, I could see that they certainly enjoyed getting all of the money that they got from Disney to up the special effects for the show. But I think that's also been a big hindrance during the Disney era as well, because the show, has a history of, do-it-yourself type of special effects. They weren't going for an Industrial Light and Magic type of thing. And when the show was brought back to air in 2005, they did have some, computer-generated stuff at the time that would now seem blasé, but, 20 years ago, it was fine for what it was. And they didn't really overdo it. And I think now it's just... I think what I liked about the show coming back was that it was more... Even though it did have your fantastical elements and you would go to alien worlds, it was still kind of much more grounded in reality that I liked compared to, what I'm seeing today. And just I don't know. To me, it would almost be a blessing if, one, the show took a few years off, and two, challenged themselves to not have to spend as much money as possible on special effects. Because this is one of those shows like South Park that shows that you can have characters that end up meaning the world to people for many, many years and not have to, have each episode cost you $200 million in special effects budget.
Right. I mean, South Park is the best example of that.
Yes. Yeah, because it's, like, if you can make that show in 6 days, it's not... I mean, they have things that will take time further down the road, I guess, if they wanted to go to like a new location. But anyway, I'm just disappointed in what I saw. And, again, do I think I'm going to go on to the second episode? Maybe. But like the first season of the Disney Plus version of Doctor Who, apart from the Christmas specials, like just have not worked. It's like the soul is out. And like, yeah, I think there is something to the idea of letting it rest for a bit, but corporations don't see entertainment properties that way. They don't see the sense of letting something, sit for a while. The whole idea of, you can't miss it if it's not gone, right? Right. And yeah, overall, disappointed. Just disappointed. The new companion seems pretty cool. She played a different character in season 1 of the Disney Plus version of Doctor Who that ended up getting killed. So more than likely, and they did mention that in this episode that I saw, hey, you're related to this person. So, they could easily tie some sort of story in, but just, Nah. Yeah. I guess Doctor Who is not for me anymore, man. Well, I mean, you could give it a chance. Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't want to. But yeah, do I think Doctor Who will die? No, because there will still be enough interest to make a decent amount of money for the BBC. They'll find a way to keep it going somehow. But maybe I just need the break.
Yeah, I mean, you have watched all of it.
Most all of it. At the start of the Peter Capaldi years, they lost me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Capaldi's a great actor. It's like the people that they've chosen to be the Doctor have all been great choices, but just the tone of the series just switched at that point, and I think, too, it was getting a little on the fantastical side. Imagine that, a show like Doctor Who, not being more grounded, but that's what really brought me into the show at the start of it was the fact that it did have a grounding in some sort of a reality that I could relate to. And I'm just not seeing that in this, in the newer versions of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know you're not a big fan of Doctor Who yourself.
No, I mean, I can watch it. Sure, I can watch it, but it just is always like so formulaic. Like there's a challenge, they go to a different place, there's a challenge, they have to fight their way out, they fight their way out, it's a surprise twist at the end. It's the same show every time, just with different characters.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Nothing wrong with that. And yeah, that is the thing with that type of storytelling. You are correct. Like, similar to like action movies, like John Wick, 1, 2, 3, and 4, those movies all pretty much hit the same beats, but you're involved in them because you care for the characters. Once that caring for the characters starts to slip, the longer a franchise goes on, that's where the problem begins.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I guess that's where I'm at.
Gotcha. It's your Jar Jar.
No, I didn't mind Jar Jar Binks, to be honest.
That's wild.
Yeah, like I know, I can understand why some people were annoyed, but he wasn't really there that much for people to really be griping. It's like the same people. It's like the people that were upset about the Ewoks.
Oh, I love the Ewoks.
Yeah, but there were plenty of people who just did not like the Ewoks and thought they were there for simply, they're there because they can sell toys. Well, one, duh, but that does not necessarily mean that they're not vital characters with their own little intricacies and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, with one of them being Warwick Davis.
Yes.
Yes. Wicket.
Yeah,
he's the one that jabs at Princess Leia, who's like unconscious on the ground with the spear. But then becomes friends with her.
Okay.
Yeah, that was supposed to be Kenny Baker, but in the Empire of Dreams documentary, you could tell he was like, I was supposed to work with her, but I was sick that day. He was all pissed.
I bet.
Yeah. But anyway, any other thoughts you want to share with our friends at home?
Nope.
You just want to wrap this up?
Well, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the cats want me to wrap it up too because they want me to feed them.
Uh-huh.
All right, so for my cats and for Professor Aubrey, each Monday we'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes until we meet again. We bid you adieu.
So long.
I'll be your Huckleberry. Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.